Okay, a couple of people on Reddit asked me how I scripted these shootable platforms that open when you shoot the target that's next to them. And I wanted to go over that and talk about two concepts when scripting something as a level designer that I think are really valuable. So the first is the idea of how long does it take you to design something, and really viewing your time as one of the resources that you're managing while building a level. Making a level faster allows you to stay motivated on it. It allows you, if you're working with a team, to get things done in a timely manner so that your team can work on it as well. And it allows you to play test the level faster. So that's the first idea. The second is about player consistency. So as your player plays your level, and hopefully the game that you're working on, they expect things to behave in a consistent manner because they build up this vocabulary of how certain items in your level work. So if in Half-Life 2, if you see a red explosive barrel, you know that when you shoot it, it's going to explode. If it didn't explode, that would weird you out. That would frustrate you. And so what I do to solve both of these problems is use instances. And they're super, super helpful. They're a great resource that you should really learn and understand how they work. So if I made, for instance, this item is a func rotating, and if I want to change how fast it rotates, I just go in here and I make the change. Go from 120 to 100 degrees per second. Now that's fine if I'm setting up a small area or it's a one-off entity, but these platforms, theoretically, I'm going to use these all throughout my level. And making a change like that is really time consuming. Maybe I can go into the entity report and pull up all those named entities and change it that way. But especially if you have these on multiple levels that you're using, or let's say you don't want to change the speed, but you want to change how it looks, all of a sudden it becomes really complicated, super time consuming, and anything past one or two edits really isn't feasible anymore because it's going to take too much time. And what if you forget one of the entities? Now you have one entity that's behaving differently than the others, not because you intended, but because of human error and how many there are in your level. So this is why instances are such a good tool to use. You don't have to use them for everything, but especially if you're scripting something that's a new gameplay element in particular, and if you're using it all across your level, if you're using more than, I'd say, 2 or 3 instances are a really good tool to consider. So let's jump in here. We're going to open this instance. You'll see the file name of the instance, and I'll hit edit right here. And this opens the actual instance. So I'll go over how I scripted this, why I scripted it the way I did, and hopefully it gives you an idea behind my thought process. So if I hide the clip brush and I go in here, the way this works, there's 3 elements to it. This is a prop door rotating, or func door rotating. This trigger acts as the sensor. And then the timer controls how long it stays down and also returns it back to the closed position. So when I was thinking about designing this, I thought about a couple of things. One is, you can do things a variety of different ways in the source engine. And so you want to pick the best method for what you're trying to do. And so I wanted the player, there's a couple of problems with FPS platforming. I've talked about them in my Reddit post. But with this, you really want the player to not have to have pixel perfect accuracy to activate the door. And so that's why I made this trigger volume so large. So basically, this is a sensor that when it gets shot, it activates specific outputs that you can see here. So you have flags, doesn't move, damage activates. And that way the player can activate it with a grenade, they can activate it with their pistol. And so the reason the volume's so large is this entity right here is really just a model. It's not really there for to be representative. It's to show you the player kind of where to shoot in general. But this actually controls what detects the hit box, and you can see it's a lot larger than the actual entity that they're aiming at. And that's for a couple of reasons. You don't want to have pixel perfect accuracy because it's already hard enough to both move and shoot simultaneously. And so I wanted it to be more forgiving. The second thing is, in my head, when I was thinking about this, I kind of did a play test in my head, and I said, okay, if I came across this in a game, how would I expect it to work? So you shoot it, the door goes down, but what if you shoot it before the door has returned? In my head, I kind of thought, well, it should restart the timer, it should start over. And so that's what we'll see in the scripting is that's also accounted for. It doesn't happen by default. So we go here to the outputs, and basically there's one output, which is on damaged, and then it fires a couple of different things. So it sets the timer back to 0, it turns it on. It also opens the door, you can see up there. It sets the color of the sprite to green, indicating that the door is open. And it also fires a separate output to control the intermediate color. And you'll see why we need that second output in a moment. So if I go into the timer here, the output's here. After the timer expires, so you see the refire interval is 3.8 seconds. After the timer expires, it turns the color of the sprite back to red, and it turns itself off. The way timers work in Source is they constantly loop through. So the reason why I have onUser1 as a separate trigger is because I don't want these two color outputs to conflict with each other. And I also want this to be able to reset back to orange if the player shoots it again. So that's controlled that way. And so this way it kind of acts the way that the player expects. Now, one question that I've been asked is, why should you use a timer? Couldn't you control everything from the delay interval in the triggers? And you could, but it's a lot messier that way. And the reason for that is, if you want to adjust, for example, let's say I had one platform that I wanted to behave differently. Maybe I need it to stay open longer because the jump's a lot harder, or something like that. Or I want it to be shorter because the jump's a lot easier. I could put a func instance parms and actually control that without having to re-edit the instance. And if I have a logic timer, I can do that, but I don't have an easy way to make that change if I'm using these delay operators. There's ways to do it. It's just a lot messier. It's a lot more time consuming, and it's not as clean. And so that's why I use the logic timer in this instance. The other thing that we did here, just for kind of a quality of life improvement for the player, as well as a little bit of bug testing I did, is I added this clip brush. Because of how Source works, you can see here, this is just a 4-unit ledge when it's closed, but in Half-Life 2, a player can stand on a 4-unit ledge for some reason. So we added this curved clip brush so that the player falls off. And when it's open, it serves double duty, because now you can see the actual standable area is actually a lot larger than the 64-unit base door. And that's really helpful. That way the player can feel like he's making this really narrow jump, but he actually has a wider range of affordance for it when he lands. So we're going to save this, and then we'll open up our test map. Let's see. I've got like a million of these open right now. We'll recompile it here, and we'll jump into the game right here. And you can see, if I reload this, here. So now if I shoot right here, it still activates. If I shoot there, still works. And when I jump, I've got a wider force now, where I don't have to be pixel perfect before I jump off.